the person at the head of the bed, it's a physical location because you're physically there, but it's also mental. It's how do I make every person in this room understand that I am in charge, everyone contributes, but ultimately I'm the head of the bed. And it is something that is incredibly translatable across every field.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the My Future Business Show. It's Rick Nusky here. I am so glad to have you here today. If you're new to the show, I know that you're in for a treat. And if you've been supporting the show for any length of time, thank you again for all of that support. Now, on today's show, I have the pleasure of welcoming international speaker, award-winning physician, and tough love MD, Amy Gutman. Welcome to the show, Amy.
Thank you so much, Rick. I appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. Been a long time coming, but we are here now. And you and I are going to be talking about the importance of mastering your mental and physical health to become a resilient powerhouse leader, how to utilize strategies and techniques to unite diverse teams with a singular focus on success, and lastly, the art of operating within frameworks to enhance company success. So, there's a lot to unpack there,
It's a
Amy.
lot. It's a lot, but they all go together pretty well.
Absolutely. I'm sure you'll guide our wonderful audience through this journey with you today. But where are you calling in from today?
So, Orlando, Florida,
Beautiful.
right in the middle, a little bit landlocked, no ocean, but right in the middle of the state.
Hey, there's a alligator alley there. Is that correct?
Everything's an alligator alley. You sort of have to the wildlife here. It's not quite Australia, but we do have our shares of things that are rather mean and bite. And
Yeah, and it's funny because
yeah,
I had this vision of a road that you have, and on the left hand side of it and the right hand
mm,
side of it, there's this waterway.
mm-mm.
And I'm thinking, nope, not walking there.
No, no. And if it gets cold, the little lizards fall out of the trees on you, which
Oh,
they're generally fine, but yeah, it's
how?
it's an yeah, it's interesting.
What a confronting situation. Now, tell me,
I
what do you
know.
love? What do you love about where you're living? Aside from
No,
that,
there's no snow.
uh huh.
I grew up in Detroit and the Midwest, and so you don't have to shovel sunshine. So that is, and we live in a wonderful little town that is kind of close to everything, and it's definitely more than theme parks. We don't go to crazy theme parks, but we love our town, love our schools. It's a great little town.
Yeah, wow, I love the theme parks myself. Every time I go to the States, I'm always driving around looking for some sort of adventure park, and there's lots of them, isn't there?
Yeah, and our favorite is Universal, and they are going to be opening Epic Universe
Wow. Yeah.
next year. I guess there's a lot of Mario Kart things I don't know much about, but I have a 15-year-old who is very, very
I
excited
bet
about it.
he
So
is.
there you
My
go. Yeah.
favorite, I think it's called Knott's Berry Farm. Is that it's something like that?
Oh, Knott's Berry Farm. I don't know where that's the jam.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
jam.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really quite nice. I do enjoy it
Oh,
over
is
there,
it?
but there's so much to see. I mean, I can't get over there enough. That's the problem with not having
Mm,
enough time in the day. But tell me something. I was reading through your information, Amy, and you're referring to yourself as a sassy humorist. What is
I
that?
am. So yeah, I think sassy is probably the nicest word. I am a primarily night shift physician.
Right.
Although my entire career I've worked all different shifts, but we tend to be a little feisty, sassy, a little blunt. I grew up. I was a firefighter and EMT for a long time, and our language tends to be a little on the saltier side. And I I think sassy is one of those things that you have to connect with your patients and connect with people. And sometimes, 3 o'clock in the morning, you have to give a little wink and a nudge. So that's a bit of my sassiness. And the humor comes from the fact that, we all sort of laugh at the human condition, not haha, it's funny, but all right, this is the
What it is.
craziness of, yeah, absolutely. And so you sort of go with that and you try to bring the humor in any situation, and it works well. It's a line. You definitely need to know the line, because if
Yes.
you yeah there's some people it's just not going to work with, and that's okay. That's
Hmm.
adaptability. But I find that humor, especially when somebody, for me, I'm an emergency physician. They come to me, they're hurt, they're sick, they're anxious. If I can get them to smile just a little bit, like my favorite thing the patients come in, they're worried that they're having a stroke or something. And I'm like, I'm going to CAT scan your head. Don't worry. I will promise you, I will find absolutely nothing in your head. And about 8 times out of 10, that
They'll
gets a
get
smile from somebody in the room. So,
it.
yeah.
I love it.
So,
You know,
yeah,
you oftentimes when I've been in a hospital in those anxious moments, the physicians are the light in an otherwise dark room. So you know, it's a real credit to you to have that sort of approach. But before we shift into the gears of talking about the core of the call, mindset, and all these other wonderful things we're going to cover,
sure.
what do you like to eat? What's your favorite food? And do you have a social life outside of work?
Oh, social life. So social life is I exercise and walk, and I
Mm,
go to the grocery store and I clean my toilets.
there you go.
I'm a mother to a 15-year-old, and I try to be as involved in there because he's just the light of my life. He's into all those wonderful computer things that I don't know anything
Oh,
about. But I just started CrossFit
oh
because
wow.
it's a way of making yourself miserable on a schedule and paying a lot of money for it. So that's
Oh, I love it. You know, at least I'm not the only one with a
I know.
you
I
know,
know, but I figure if I'm gonna be tough love MD, I need to, like, I need to be tough love. But
yeah.
do you do CrossFit as well? I'm sorry if you do.
No, well, look, do you give yourself some time to have a break now and then? Do you like a movie? What's your thing?
I have an incredibly short attention span. My favorite thing to do when I'm not at work, I like being on a ship. I love cruising. And
Oh,
if I can take, like, if there's a long weekend and there's a ship, we live right in Florida, you literally can just go, I'm going to go and just go.
off you go.
And yeah, and I love the fact that to me, sometimes it's the destination that's the destination. And sometimes it's the ship that's a destination. It's, food and activities and entertainment and meeting interesting people or just not doing anything
At
at
all.
all.
At
At
all.
all.
Yep.
And plus, it's a great way. I know people tend to poo poo it, but for me, okay, I'm going to go see 10 countries in 10 days, but I'll write down, hey, this was really cool in this country. This was really cool in this country. And it leads you to go back to those countries and explore. That's how I actually ended up working in Bermuda. We
Oh,
had gone on a cruise, and I have a picture, a little video of us like pulling into Bermuda. And I'm saying to my husband, I'm like, oh gosh, I want to live here someday. And he's like, you haven't even set foot, you haven't even set foot. I'm like, I don't know. It's calling to me. And it took 6 years, but
there you go.
that's where we go. Yeah. So that's my
Absolutely.
fun. And
Wonderful.
food, so after 37 years as a vegan, I am now a carnivore,
There you
which
go.
it was one of the things that kinda started the journey into changing kinda everything the way I look at medicine and life, and, so, yeah, I'm one of those crazy people. I don't have abs. You will never see me, as a influencer flashing my abs. They're in there somewhere, but you will not see me, like one of the influencers on
Oh,
the
yeah, I'm
carnivore
with you.
flashing my abs, no.
No, I'm with you. No, absolutely. Now, tell me a little.
What's your favorite food? I'm
My
curious.
favorite food. Oh goodness me, you've caught me on the hop there. I
I'm
would
gonna
have.
ask you.
I would have to say, I actually like sourdough bread with chili tuna on it. That's my
Chil
favorite thing.
chili tuna? What is chili
Yes, it's
tuna?
like an infused chili in a tuna
Oh,
sauce, and
interesting.
and you don't put butter or anything like that on it. You just have a nice soft, or as soft as
Nice.
sourdough gets,
Sure.
and you put it on there, and you can toast that, and maybe a bit of cheese. And I've got so many
Nice.
different things I could offer up there. I
Sounds
tell
good,
you what,
though.
it's only I'm already hungry speaking about it, but. Enough about me. Let's talk about
Alright.
you. if
Okay.
if we go back a little bit, Amy, I wonder. This is the part of the call that I really enjoy is talking about growing up as kids. Tell me a
Mm.
little bit about growing up for you.
Well, I grew up in Detroit, and it's really quite nice because we had grandparents close by. Um, we initially started off in like not the greatest part of Detroit and kind of moved out to the suburbs. One of those little, ideal childhoods in my mind because, you had grands and you had all the wonderful things.
Of course.
And I have a younger brother, and My dad's into computers. My mom was a teacher, and she had like a variety of all different jobs. Then we moved out to the East Coast in Connecticut, and high school and all those wonderful things. I joined the fire department and was an EMT and later on a firefighter for many years, which sort of transitioned me into my life in emergency medicine. So I'm very grateful, and I still work in fire at EMS educating. I'm not active anymore because I'm now a little bit older, a little bit
Shifting
wiser.
gears,
Yes,
shifting
shifting
gears.
gears. But yeah, it was, you look back on it and you think, oh my gosh, I can't believe that was, 40 plus years ago
Time
when I
flies.
know it does, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Well, tell me a little bit about, I guess, your daily routine. Are you still an early riser? What's a day look like for you?
Well, my early rising is everyone else's night, which actually it makes for international talks nice. So I work right now. I only work night shifts. I work as an attending emergency physician at one of the local Orlando hospitals, top hospital in Orlando.
Of
Just
course.
saying.
Yep.
And we have a delightfully busy emergency department. We have great staff, our nurses, our techs, our housekeepers, clerks. It's just really, really nice. And I work at one very large hospital, which has all the bells and whistles, and then two smaller, what we call freestandings, which are essentially an entire emergency department, but they don't have the hospital upstairs.
Ah,
And
right.
so it's has everything you'd have in an emergency department, just not like a cath lab or OB.
Yep.
And if you need those things, we transfer you out to the big house. And it also it's charming. It can be busy. It's completely overrun, and we've been ramping up a lot of viral illnesses. But
Hmm.
you certainly, well, let's put it this way: I usually get about 4 to 5 miles in every night, just running from room to room.
Yes.
So yeah, it's
Get your
but
steps up.
you get your steps in, you get your cardio, and I have the most amazing staff. Our team is fantastic, so I'm really lucky.
It's very interesting that we're starting to talk about this early in, and I'd love to shift gears and look at that very closely
Sure,
in terms of frameworks, leadership, teamwork, and that sort of thing. But
sure.
there's so many abbreviations and terms that I'm not familiar with in your space. I'm wondering,
Yes.
can you just explain to me what the abbreviation MDFACEP actually means?
Sure. So I'm a medical doctor.
Yep.
So a medical doctor, you can be a DO, which is a doctor of osteopathy, which is a similar but different medical degree.
Right.
And then FACEP. So when you've been board certified in emergency medicine for 10 years, you can apply to be what's called a fellow. So it's about the top 10% of emergency physicians. You have to do all these projects, and it's a little
Extracurricular
it's
study.
a yes, it's a little tedious, research, and then
Yep.
you'd be, if you are granted a fellow status. So FACEP is a fellow of the American College of Emergency Physicians. um, it is something I'm really, really proud of,
Of
and
course.
because it
Yes.
takes, and I'm not one of those people who is gonna, you might notice behind me, you don't see all the diplomas and things. You see our pretty pictures from places we've been in the universe, but
Uh-huh.
I'm very proud of my expensive pieces of paper.
Yeah, well, look, you should be too, because having been down that path in a similar way, I know that the dollars, the cents soon turn into dollars, don't they, when you're trying to
Oh
go through the
goodness.
intuition?
Oh goodness. It is the average, I think, and my data might be a little bit out of date, but the average medical student, if they go like, the private high school, private college, medical school, residency, they are well around the 500,000 plus
Yes,
mark in debt, the US.
it's crazy.
And it's, you know, it's a huge amount of time and mental effort, but the financial aspects of it are ridiculous,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely ridiculous. But it's I did it a little differently in that I was blessed to not be the not particularly best student in the world, which wasn't a blessing at the time. But I'm dyslexic, and I had a bit of trouble with courses and working full time. And
Hmm.
because my grades were good, but they weren't fantastic, I ended seeking alternative education. I actually went to medical school in the Caribbean, and people look at you like in horror, like, "Oh my God, you're didn't go to Harvard." And but I left. I paid. Our rule in life is we do not go to school until we've paid for the last degree.
Yes.
So got my master's after college and then ended up going to foreign med school, but I graduated from medical school residency, all of that with less than $120,000 in debt,
That's crazy.
which is people still look at that and go, "Oh my gosh, that's a
It's pretty good.
crazy amount," but still,
Pretty good.
yeah, it's so I'm pretty happy with that. No one cares.
No, look, I
Honestly,
certainly do.
nobody cares.
I love this whole experience, this whole journey that you've been on, because I always think about, it's one thing to be in academia and study theory and all that sort of
Yeah,
stuff, and then you see the interns that are going through their, I guess, their placements, and they're basically walking around with the doctors who are experienced. How do you go from that? I guess that theoretical standpoint through to the physical implementation of results for living human beings. Is that the
sure.
hardest part for you?
Honestly, the hardest day of your entire medical career
Mm.
is going to be July 1st, wherever it is in the universe, because so on June 30th or 31st, I don't remember how
Yep.
many days in June, you are a resident.
Yep.
You have attendings, you have people supporting you, you're technically still a student. July 1st, you're an attending physician.
Wow.
And I think in from the mental transition, you still have exactly the same people around you. Might be a different hospital, but
Mm.
you have more experienced people, experienced nurses. My husband's a nurse, and you know, a well-trained nurse will save a doctor 99% of the time,
Oh, yeah.
especially our new ones. But that's the hardest day, and it's very difficult for our new physicians to ask for help because they feel that, oh no, I'm a grown up. I'm just gonna do it, I'll figure it out. And that's a bit of a dangerous time
Mm.
because, I mean, I've been in let's see, 2004 is when I started in as a physician, and I still learn something every day. I love working with other physicians or specialists or nurses, like people who have done different things, or I can, "Hey, this EKG looks a little funky. What do you think?"
Mm.
There's no shame in that. It's
No.
actually, like, amazing to be able to go to a colleague, and do that, and so I think that's the hardest part for our newbies is trying to establish themselves as, "I'm a adult physician, I'm an, attending physician," versus, "I'm just not gonna ask because I don't want people to think I don't know anything,"
Well, I
which can be
think that,
harmful.
I think that I wouldn't call it vulnerability for lack of searching
Mm,
for better words at the second. That willingness to say, hey, look, um, I need your advice, your input. I think that's
sure.
a powerful position to take. Now, you talked about the end of one month to the next and
Yeah,
becoming that attending physician. That's a mindset shift. Now, tell me
huge.
about, I guess, that waking up of that first morning. Can you recall it? And what happened to your
Oh,
mindset?
well, yeah, actually, day 2 was actually more interesting than day 1, because day 2 was when I met my future husband.
Oh, there you go.
Well, there you go. So, day 1 is just so back in the day, I'm experienced enough. We so later on in my residency, we had something called the Bell Commission. The Bell Commission was something in the United States that was developed to keep physician students and residents from working more than 90 hours a week. And you think, oh my God, that's just crazy. But before that time, it would be routine to do like 4 to 8 hours and just plow through it.
Mhm.
And there are ridiculously some benefits to it because it really does help you think on your feet when you're exhausted. Not a lot of other benefits. It's quite dangerous. But back in the day, there was no bell commission. So you start day 1 and you round and it's 3 o'clock in the morning. You don't know what you're doing and your passwords and your badge. And it's really overwhelming. You spend a lot of time really trying not to cry, which,
I bet.
as one does. Um, so day 2, and I was a surgery resident at that time and at a lovely small hospital, and I was on trauma surgery and cardiac surgery, and a patient had a very, very bad post-op complication. In those days, there was a senior surgical resident and the junior surgical resident. We were the only two surgeons in the entire hospital, unless the attending came in. I had a patient crash in the ICU, and now
Mm.
this was before YouTube
Yep.
and Google. I'm that old. And my patient crashed, and I called my senior. I'm like, "What do I do?" He said, "Open the chest, massage the heart. I'll be there as soon as I can. I'm in the middle of an appendix." He was in the OR. Well, I had watched
Yes.
television shows with it, and so I come in this room, and the room is full of, it looked like 50 nurses, and everyone just, nobody's panicking. Everyone's
Calm.
doing their job. Everyone's talking to each other, and they literally like pliers to undo, the
Yes.
how to get the chest, and I'm doing the best I can, and out of the room, a nurse, this handsome, wonderful, burly, hairy gentleman comes in, loaded up with bags of packed red cells that he's tossing to the nurse in the corner. And I am literally covered head to toe in blood at that point. And he looks over to me, slaps me on the back, and says, "Hey, doc, I don't know who you are." He said, "You're looking good." And then he walks out. And I'm literally elbow deep into another human being who did great, by the way,
Fantastic
left the
news.
hospital,
Mm.
and I'm doing this, and we finished, and the nurses looked at me, the other nurses, and like, don't start. Don't start with this. Don't flirt with the nurses. Don't, no, no, no.
No, no,
Off
no.
limits, off limits. And yeah, unfortunately, I did not,
Did
for
not.
once, I did not
No.
take their advice.
No. Well, look,
No.
he sounds
Yeah.
sounds charming.
He's wonderful. Actually, it's interesting because my first OR case, his father was actually the nurse anesthetist on the case, and I did not realize that until about a year later. They
It's a
worked in the
small
same
world.
hospital.
6 degrees of
It
separation,
is.
isn't it?
It is. It is. It is.
Well,
But
tell me,
yeah,
he's certainly one form of an inspirational person in your life. How many others have there
absolutely.
been that give you
Oh,
guidance and great ideas, even till today?
so
I
many. I
bet.
mean, obviously, parents and grandparents. I was lucky enough to have all four grandparents grow up about as different as you could be. One was a recent immigrant family from overseas, sort of the World War II, sort of Holocaust era, and the other was a fourth generation, Chicago, down south, moved to Detroit. One were very reformed Jews, the other were Orthodox Jews. Uh, Everybody was fiercely passionate about their families and education. So, really fantastic role models. They emphasize the fact that it doesn't matter what you do in life, just do it well. They didn't
Absolutely.
care.
Yeah.
Um, Parents, and then honestly, I've met so many people over the year that you take a little tidbit from this and you remember this person and that person, and people who gave you a chance or an opportunity when they had absolutely no reason to. It didn't benefit them at all. Like you, when we initially spoke, like, "Hey, I know you're interested in this. These are all the things you need. You don't think you need them. You don't know you need them. But let me get these things. Let me help you with this
Mm,
for no other reason that, hey, it's a nice thing to do."
absolutely.
And those are the people I think, honestly, who make maybe even a bigger impression because they really don't have an incentive
No.
other than being a good human,
Yeah.
which that's not really a bad incentive at all, is it?
No, not at all. Well, look, I appreciate that feedback, and I think to myself, there is a lot of good being done in a reasonably grey world at the moment, and I
Yes.
think we need to hold our corner in this regard. That tell me, I know that you've had let's call it an illustrious career as a professional speaker. Tell me a little bit
Professional.
about that. A
It's
pro
a big
speaker.
it's a pro speaker. Yeah, it's a bit of a transition year in that I have, taught for EMS and medical and, in nursing forever,
Hmm.
30 plus years. And then recently, I made a transition to still keeping my passion project for EMS, which is great, except every time I lecture for EMS, I tend to lose money, which doesn't mean I'm the world's greatest businessman. So I don't know if that should be, and emphasizing that point on my future business. But I randomly had someone approach me about 8 months ago, a little bit less than that, saw my profile on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, we had a speaker drop out literally tomorrow in Orlando. Are you available?" I said, "Well, I'm working." He said, "It's 5 grand." I said, "I will do my best to switch my shift." And as it turned out, I couldn't switch a shift, but they were also very gracious about it because I found them a speaker, and so it wasn't me, but I found them someone to fill. And I said, "What is this $5,000 you were talking about? This is the most ridiculous thing. Speakers don't earn 5,000." He's like, "Yeah, they do."
Yeah, they do. Plus.
No, and no, they don't. And he said, "You are a physician. How do you not? You must know how to speak to people." And you, I said, "Well, I talk to firefighters and EMTs and docs and the conferences you have to pay." And they're like, "No, no, 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 no. If you're a physician, you've got to have your thing. What is your thing?" And if he said, "Let me put you in touch with some people." And he did. And I realized that the things that had made me successful as a physician, and around the same time I had discovered a complete, the time going from vegan to carnivore completely changed my outlook on medicine, health, and resiliency. I'm like, "Hey, this might be an interesting way to fund my EMS projects." Meaning, if I can book 2 or 3 jobs that pay a lot of money, that would allow me to take the jobs where I'm really like passionate about education,
Hmm,
because they're first line providers. They have to be really, really good at what they do.
of course.
And that's how I transitioned into this. And I'm slowly, word of mouth has so much importance to it. You can do all the, Twitter and YouTube, which I'm learning. And I feel that I'm going to look back on what I'm doing 5 years from now and just shudder in horror. But I'm
No,
trying. I'm
not at all. You're
trying.
doing wonderfully well.
Yeah, and so it's been lovely. Like last week, I worked my full-time job here in Orlando, and yet I was able to speak in India and London, and Orlando, at and never leave my little living room slash gym slash dining room.
That's great, isn't
So
it?
it was nice. Yeah.
The power of the internet. It's just so wonderful. I can't even speak highly enough of it.
Oh, sure.
You
And
know,
you're in a great example of it too. I literally had never listened to a podcast before last year. I thought it was, teenage boys in their basement with a microphone talking about Dungeons and Dragons.
well,
Not
maybe,
to be
yeah.
disparaging,
No,
not
no,
to be
but there
disparaging.
probably is, by the way.
I'm sure, and I'm sure I'm sure they earn a lot of money doing it. But I really didn't know anything, and I think it's a fantastic opportunity to, number one, meet other people. And sure, you're promoting something. You're in my world, it's me as the product, but you're also being able to talk about things that you're, number one, interested in, but number two, it might not be your sole topic, but it's an interesting discussion, which
Yeah.
I think is great.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder about. I went through all the list of the lectures that you give. You've got a number of different ones. I'd love for you if you could share a little bit about some of them. One of them is called "Lessons from the Head of the Bed." Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's that is actually one of my favorite things, and it's sort of transitioning. That is sort of the theme of the book that I'm working on. It's, lessons from the head of the bed. The head of the bed is the position that any physician takes during a resuscitation. An EMT, who is the most senior, takes it during a resuscitation. So when someone has a critical event, either medical or traumatic, the way that a room works is the same here in Orlando, St. Croix, on a ship, on a helicopter. It is the exact same way. The tools may be different, the people may be different, the team members may change roles, but it's always the same way. Everyone has a job with a singular focus on bringing a person back to life or preventing something worse from happening. The person at the head of the bed, it's a physical location because you're physically there, but it's also a mental thing. It's How do I make every person in this room understand that I am in charge, everyone contributes, but ultimately I'm the head of the bed,
Yeah.
HOB. And it is something that is incredibly translatable across every field. In business, the person who runs the bank, they're the head of the bed. When something bad happens at a call center, you pick up the phone, the person who is figuring out a problem, they're the head of the bed. And how you hold yourself and manage yourself in those positions. Like, I think Jocko Willing, who is amazing, is a Navy SEAL, brilliant. He he has said, and I'm paraphrasing him, of course,
Mm.
you will know a leader in a room. You walk into a room, you could have rows of people, 100 people. You will be able to look in that room and you can tell exactly who the leader is. They don't have to say a word. They don't have to, you just go, that
Same.
one, that one. And it's the way you hold yourself, the way you speak. I'm a bit of a chameleon because, okay, yeah, I might be a sassy humorist in the room next door, but a code comes in. I go to the head of the bed, and everyone on my team knows my room is silent. There is no chaos. There is one voice. If I say something, someone says something back to me. So we don't have any confusion, because the more confusion it gets, the more chaos it gets, everything potentially can go wrong, especially in like really critical situations. So I think the term, like at a restaurant, is called in the weeds. If
Mm.
you're like, if like lunchtime and like 1,000 people show up, you're in the weeds,
Yep.
and you watch all these, you know, shows, these things on television about the backs of kitchens and things like that. And I don't watch a lot of
No,
TV,
me
but I
neither.
find it interesting because you'll have 1,000 people at a kitchen screaming at each other, and you wonder why meals don't come out right.
Yeah.
Why do people like, I'm allergic to shellfish, and oh my gosh, there was shellfish on my plate and now I died, because people are screaming at each other. They're in the weeds, right?
Yep.
That cannot happen. That cannot happen in a resuscitation. So it's a interesting thing, and I don't know if we specifically talked about it. One of the jobs that I took in one of my various midlife crises that I've had, which I highly encourage, by the way,
Oh
they're
yeah.
fantastic for you,
Yep.
is I took a job as a ship physician on a cruise ship. Um, and there was a lot of certainly crazy circumstances, but the day that I signed on, and cruise ship staff, if you've ever been on a ship, they're multi-denominational, multilingual,
Mm.
and even though everyone is prepped, when you have an emergency 30 minutes after you get on a ship and you realize that you're surrounded by Romanians, South Africans, Brazilians, I think we had one Venezuelan,
Mm.
mm, and you have to figure out what's the language you're going to use. Oh my gosh, these drugs are all from Europe. They have European names. Let's check our dosages. And it literally took about 45 seconds for us to just figure out, okay, who are these new people? What are our roles? And go. Everyone, it's funny. You walk to a physical position, but it's also in here. And again, we were, teamwork and luck, and the patient survived and did well. But it is the fact that we all have that framework that is incredibly well established, but we change it up depending on the circumstances. I am not in a hospital that have a cath lab upstairs when you're in the middle of the ocean. You have a helicopter that's being launched from the shores because you can't slow down a ship. You have all of these other factors that you have to take into account that add to your framework,
Yep.
but the core of that framework is exactly the same. It's what I like to call functional adaptability. You have to be so good at your job that everything can change except the core things, and you can still do your job well. So that is kind of what I'm going from the, hey, this drug for this disease, click, this drug for this disease, click, you must know this algorithm, click, to trying to inspire people in the world of medicine, but outside of the world of medicine as well, to become that person that everybody recognizes as a leader, as the head of the bed, And you can use that in your life, in your business, uh, in your relationships. It makes you incredibly powerful. And I'm really passionate about it.
Absolutely. Look, this has been great feedback. Thank you so much. Now,
Thank you.
you've already touched on leadership. You know, the head of the bed story sort of gave me that lead in quite well. But when you have diverse teams, what are some of the things that you do? Let's call them strategies or daily
Mm.
techniques that you employ to get the results that you need, that you must demand of them.
So it's an interesting word when you say demand, because I think some people may take that as a negative, but I don't. I think, especially in medicine, like any business, anything that's important, you have to demand a level of intelligence. You have to. We all seek perfection. We None of us achieve it, but we all seek it. And so it's an interesting thing. You talk about, international speaker. Well, one of the things that I learned from one of my first lectures, I was giving it virtually in India. And I was talking with the organizer and I said, what do we expect from the audience? And she said, well, a lot of our listeners will be from Asian countries, Indian countries, a lot of more conservative folks. And so, like today, so I have my little brand colors, because as one
Hmm.
does,
Of course.
but I tend to cover my shoulders, and I tend to cover because there are some cultures where that may be considered offensive, and I would never want to stand out and unknowingly offend someone. Absolutely. I try to be very respectful of different cultural differences. um, I speak enough of many different languages to at least say hello to everyone in what their language is of choice.
Yep.
I have been a terrible Spanish speaker now for 3 years. um, it, I but we have a lot of housekeepers, for example, and nurses and techs from Puerto Rico, from Spain, from Colombia. I try to greet everyone in their home language because it's respectful. Um, and especially, it's a weird thing in this day and age where almost 50% of emergency physicians are female, interestingly enough. It has to do with the call schedule and things. As a shorter female, a very loud short female, but I'm short, like 5'1" on a very, very good day.
With heels.
Yes, with oh no, we don't do the heels. After I
Flats, yes.
last time I wore heels, I ended up with a skull fracture, but a story for another day. Not a joke.
Oh,
But you have to establish, and I don't mean dominance, like I'm like a dog, like I'm going to pee on your leg, but you have to establish the fact that, hey, this is my job. I'm
yep,
really good at what I do. I'm 100% open to suggestions, because that you talked about vulnerability. I think vulnerability can actually be really a form of strength.
yep,
You have to be able to ask for help, but you also have to establish the fact that, hey, this is the way we're doing it. It might be a little different than what you're doing, but let me explain to you, either in the moment or after, why this works.
yep.
And I think that is very helpful, because every night we have different ages, different experiences, different hospitals, different languages, different cultures. I think it's a beautiful thing about our society that we have that. And it's an interesting challenge to make it all work. Sometimes it does,
Mm,
sometimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you have to, again, it's the adaptability. Is it something I need to work on? Is it something maybe they need to work on? Um, for example, there are some cultures where you can't like physically touch a person of the opposite sex.
mm-hmm,
So you may, and I think there's a little video from, I think last year, Princess Catherine from England. She had reached out to shake the hand of someone from, I believe it was one of the Muslim countries, and immediately realized that he had put his hand here. He was being very respectful, but couldn't touch her hand. But it was people had said, "Oh, that's a completely faux pas on her part." Absolutely not. That was her culture.
yep,
Okay, That was his culture. I'm going to respond to that in kind, not a faux pas.
Not at
It's
all.
you move on, not at
We
all. And I think it's actually was really kind of a lovely moment because she's so gracious.
mm, yeah, well,
Didn't break her smile.
we're kind of living and learning and growing at the same time, aren't we? I can't help but think when I think about the leadership conversation and the
Mhm.
teamwork that we've discussed thus far, Amy, about I guess the saying that a rising tide lifts all ships. Now, with
Yes.
that being said, how important is it for you to become the change that you want to see in your team?
Oh, you can't emphasize it enough. It is one of the things that if your team is looking to you to be the leader, then you're not just a leader in that moment. You have to be the leader at all time. They will see me 10 minutes before, laughing, smiling. Again, I try to not keep it light, like I'm being disrespectful, but we live in such a stressful environment. We have patients in the hallways, we have patients coming in, there's EMS. Every patient could literally
Tightrope.
crash at a moment. Yeah, it's a tightrope. And so if we are always grumpy and cranky and stressed out, that your tension, that tone transmits to everyone. Um, they know that sometimes I'll put in just like a little bit of music to kind of
Bring it
just
down.
bring it down a little bit. They know that I'm a little bit off kilter with my humor because I don't really understand culture at all. And so we had a patient come in who had a really challenging airway problem, anaphylaxis. So they had an allergic reaction to, I don't even remember what it was, but their lips were swollen, their face was swollen, their tongue was swollen. It
Mm.
was absolutely horrible. And I remember my scribe, who are young students who are trying to get into medical school, literally 15 minutes before was showing me something about one of the Kardashians who I'm culturally aware of, don't know their names, but these huge lips. And this patient literally came in who was panicking. The key with somebody who's having an airway issue from anaphylaxis, this overwhelming allergic reactions, is they cannot panic. If they panic, they lose their airway and it can be horrific. So
Mm.
I walk in, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's one of those Kardashians.
Mm.
And she couldn't smile because her face, was a
Wow.
bit of a balloon, but I could see her eyes crinkle. She grabbed my hand and she was just, it literally took the room down, and it took everyone in that room. Her family took it down. I got to hold her hand and just take that moment and go, all right, I gotcha. I gotcha.
It's
You
funny
put a little
because
trust in me.
I think about, status and, the influences of the world. At the end of the day, they've got 2 feet and a heartbeat. And when crisis strikes, they become very human, very mortal, very quickly, don't
100%.
they?
2 feet in a heartbeat. That's awesome.
Yeah, you can take that.
That's one. I might steal that. Can I?
Every day
If I ask you permission, can I? Is it
Oh,
stealing?
it's yours. You take it. Every day I wake up, I say to myself, thank you for what I have. And now that I've
Yes.
got 2 feet and a heartbeat, I'm doing all right. So I know that, science and education and all these things intertwine, play a massive part. But I want you to tell me, do you think that a person's intuition develops the more experience that they have in your sort of field? Do you get that sense?
So I call it the hair at the back of the neck.
Ah,
It's definitely, and so it's kind of a yes and a no. There are people who are very, very experienced who just never have that sense that something is awry. I think it's not whether it's an awareness of self or others, but they just don't have that sense, that sixth sense. But um, for example, the nurses will know if I walk by a room and I stop and I kind of look back at that room and I look at the vital signs, everything looks good. There's just
not right.
something doesn't look right. And so the crash cards, the code cards, which all the resuscitation things on their red
Mm,
cards, they're pretty universal.
yeah.
Because so I should be able to go to a hospital in wherever and
Yeah.
go, oh, that's my crash card. And they're organized the exact same way. I will roll it down the hallway and put it in front of the room. And the nurses are, what do you see? I'm not seeing it. What do you see? I'm like, just it's, and I do this something.
Something, something.
And It might just be a feeling, it might be a sense, but it tells you that something is going on. When I'm so used to this point, and I don't mean this disparaging of my patients. Everybody lies, whether it's intentional or not intentional. How did that hot sauce bottle get up your bottom, sir? It's like, well, let me tell you a story. Okay, I
I was
can't wait.
fishing one day.
Let me sit down and let's. I'm going to sit down for this one, sir. I can't wait.
You can't, but
Can't
I
wait.
will.
Yeah. So I know, I know. But yeah, I think intuition's one thing, but it's very funny though. Mine is very situational. Like I will walk to the grocery store and I will be completely unaware of things that are going on around me. I think my brain kind of shuts off. I'm like,
Yep.
what? What's
Yeah.
going on?
No.
And in fact, my husband put a tracker on my iPhone. The thing, Find My Phone,
Yes, yes.
because after work, if I was off, I like to walk, I like to exercise, and I would wander off for like an hour or two listening to this, podcast that I discover, and I would get myself completely lost, and I would have literally no idea where I was. 'Cause I'm like, well, I'm on a street.
I'm still on
This
Earth.
is my huh, and I'd have to call him. I'm like, where am I? And it's like, oh, good Lord, do I have to come find you? Yes,
I love it.
I've wandered off a bit
He,
like a puppy.
I tell you what, he is your angel. That's for sure and
He's
certain.
wonderful.
Now,
He's absolutely wonderful.
I always think to myself, professionals like you have such a great deal of focus. Do you ever stop and you say to yourself, I guess, how does it make you feel? Is another way to approach this question. When you actually see results, do you allow yourself to feel
Ah,
emotions? Do you allow
oh,
yourself to feel the moment?
I think so. I don't think there's a time where you don't feel emotions. Sometimes you can't show them.
Right.
Critically ill children, patients at the end of life, or that sort of sinking feeling when somebody tells you a story and you're going to find something bad just from what they're describing to you. Like, oh,
Mm,
it's and so I think empathy is so important. It's interesting in medicine, there's the concept of paternalism or maternalism, where you're not supposed to share. In my experience, this is how I feel, because you don't want to put that on a patient. But I find that, again, it goes back to that vulnerability. I think patients want to know that someone else maybe has the same experiences, or at least we understand what's going on. The wins, though, are so important because we lose so many times. 85% of what I see in the emergency department is the result of chronic disease. And maybe if somebody 10 years earlier or 20 years earlier had set them upon a different path, maybe they wouldn't be in my emergency department. And we don't win for a lot of those. It's a lot of, not everything is irreversible, but sometimes things are just so bad that we can't make it too much better.
mm,
So when we do have a win, it's fantastic. And it can be as simple as, I'm going to put your shoulder back in. And they leave and like, oh, wow. I'm like, don't do that. I just put it back in. Don't put it down. Um, but, and then the team shares it, and it's even better. So, we have, customer service and patient satisfaction, and it's a discussion for another day, because I find that sometimes it does more harm than good, believe it or
mm,
not. But every now and again, we'll get like a little letter or a little follow up from someone. Hey, I just want you to know that I did great. My mom left the hospital and she's wonderful. I really appreciate it. I don't remember your name or the nurse's name, but I know you were there and you made a difference. Thank you. And it's a very starfish principle. My friend, I call my evil twin, Jeremy, introduced me to, and it's the parable that an older man is walking in the ocean, and he sees all these starfish on the sand, and a young boy is picking up one and throwing in the ocean, picking up one and throwing in the ocean, and he says, "What are you doing, child? You're not going to be able to save all of them." And he picks one up and he says, "Yes, but to this one, it matters." To this one, it matters. And I think the essence of what we do and why I'm trying to now focus on, I'm sure my bosses won't be happy to hear this, but keeping people out of the emergency department. If I can help people understand that they are resilient, they are tougher than they think they are, they can be healthier than they think they could ever be, and they can be leaders in their own lives, in their own businesses, that to me makes up for everything else bad, because in a way it's repentance. I have spent many years patching boo-boos and not going back to the cause of their boo-boos. I love patching boo-boos, don't get me wrong,
Yes. Yep.
but it would be lovely if I didn't have to see patients dying every night from preventable chronic illness. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's just that's my goal, and meeting like-minded people like yourself
Mm.
and people who don't realize that they're passionate about it,
You know what?
which is funny.
As a MD, your mandate is the preservation of life.
Do no
Um,
harm.
do no
First, do no
harm.
harm.
So I can't see why your bosses would be upset by that if that's the same mandate
Well,
they would experience.
well, there are bills to pay.
Yeah, I
Yes, as
suppose.
I know.
Yep.
Actually, one of my attendings, you talk about mentors. Um, primum non nocere is the Latin for first do no harm. He posted something in the ICU, and it says primum do goodum. He said, yeah, he said, sure, you can aim to do no harm. He goes, but primarily you should aim to do good. And it is a very distinct difference. And I think it's an important one. Primum do goodum.
I love it. I love it.
Of course, he started every day by giving everyone donuts and chocolate bars as we were
Ah.
rounding.
One
Well,
here's that tangential decision. Do you
I
eat it or
know,
you don't? It's up to you.
I know.
And now
How's
tell
your
me.
pancreas? How's
Now,
your pancreas today?
earlier you touched on the book that you were starting to write. I'd just like for
Yes,
you just to quickly, I guess, elaborate a little more, if you could, Amy, in
sure.
terms of how long that might be before it comes out.
Well, we are hoping, I'm crossing my fingers on this one, for around February or so, because I have a big, exciting conference coming up in March that is going to be one of those like really exciting potential launch things. But I as funny as I think I am in real life, I don't know if anyone else would agree. I am a absolutely horrible writer, and I had someone approach me. They had listened to one of my lectures, and they're like, "Oh, hey, this is like you're funny." I'm like, "Ah, I think so too." Just
Funny that.
like funny, haha. And he said, "You should write down some of these stories." And I'm like, "Yeah, I could do that." Um, and it's I'm thinking that lead your life like a resuscitation, lessons from the head of the bed. I'm like, oh, that would be leadership. I'm gonna have all these great. And then I sat down with a pen to paper or, fingers to keyboard and realized, yeah, I can't write. It was horrible on so many levels. Looked at my husband like, I don't even know how many pages a book has because all I read are, ninth and 10th grade school books and, with my son. So one of the editors said, "Hey, listen, we have a lot of people who are sciencey people who just they're used to writing technical things, which I do write. I write research papers." And he said, "How about we dictate?"
Ah.
He goes, "I'm going to." He goes, "You write out the outline of the things that are important to you and the stories you want to tell. I'm going to ask you questions about them, and then I want you to tell me stories. We are going to dictate it, and we are going to give it to our typist to write up exactly what you say. And then you and I are going to sit down and make really interesting book about it to help people figure out how to live those lives." And it has been so fascinating to have these like ideas in my mind, like, oh my gosh, functional adaptability, what's a story that goes with it? um, Midlife crises, why you should embrace a crisis. So it's bigger than a talk, but how to not fear those things and then how to apply it to your daily life, whether you're in medicine or business. It may sell no copies. It may sell 100 million, although one would hope. And I will use my newfound knowledge of not understanding how to use Twitter and LinkedIn to keep people posted. But I'm really hoping that it's not just a vehicle to market on, late night television, like, hire me, here's my book, but
No.
actually
Yeah.
maybe somebody could read it, and obviously it's really difficult as a physician because
Yep.
it has to be HIPAA compliant, privacy,
Of
no
course.
names, no locations, unless somebody has specifically said,
It's
"Hey."
okay. Yep.
Yeah, and, meeting my husband in the middle of an ICU, he's like, "Oh my gosh, you've told that story a million
I
times, so
love
sure." Yeah,
it.
but I'm hoping that, when it does come out, I'm enjoying the process. I have a
It's
degree in English. It's one of my weird degrees that I got, but it was literature,
mm,
and I I realized I haven't written anything but a research paper in about 30, 40 years, so it's been
wow.
a process. So I will keep you up to date, and I would actually, I may ask to come back at
Of
a future
course.
a
Yes.
future
Look,
time, and
the door's
my New York
always open.
Times my New York Times bestseller.
Absolutely. Top of the Amazon hit list. Now, tell me,
Absolutely.
when it does become available early next year, let's keep
Yeah.
our fingers crossed for that. The
Yes, absolutely.
expectation is that you do come back on the show and share it with
I
us.
would
But
love it.
when will, I guess, will it be available on your new website? And can you tell us
Yes.
about the website?
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a nice segue. It is www.toughlovemd.expert. Um, and my email, and my email is going to be changing. If for our audience, Rick has said you cannot have Gmail. Oh, goodness.
Well, you
But
can, but
you can, but it's not professional. But currently, my email is pre-hospital MD, PREHOSPITALMD, like the doctor, M, at gmail.com, soon to be something else.
yep.
But toughlovemd.expert. I'm on Twitter at toughlovemd, and LinkedIn under my name, Amy Gutman. And I'm starting some YouTube as well, but you can see some of my signature lectures, my talks. I'm completely customizable. If you have a conference that, hey, you need, like, leadership, wellness, and resiliency, I think, are intrinsically tied. But if you say, hey, I'm doing for example, I applied to a real estate conference here in Orlando. I have no idea if I'll be hired or not, but it's for women professionals in real estate in leadership. Well, I know nothing about real estate, zero. I have a nice condo, but it's women in leadership. I'm like, hey, this is my pitch. I may know nothing about real estate, but I know a ton about leadership and resiliency. And if that's the crowd, let me see what I can do for you. And you can look at my speeches. You can look at my currently horrible YouTube videos. And at some point, when I get a little bit more video, a nice speaker reel, I, of course, will post all my lovely LinkedIn and all my podcasts on there too. But you can see the wonders of adding a little bit of a filter to my hair, which
Uh,
tends to look awful on a daily basis. Very good doctor. Uh, no one told me as a speaker that you'd have to learn how to apply makeup, and
oh,
that
there you
is,
go.
I know. But yeah, toughlovemd.expert, and I can be reached there. There's a contact form. Nothing makes me happier to reach out to folks who have a question, or especially if you want me to come and give a fantastic 120% effort lecture or talk to your audiences. I am 100% ready, and I would love to meet anyone that you would expose me to out there.
Fantastic. Well, look, if you're on today's call, we've had a bit of a journey on this conversation, that's for sure and certain. But I suspect that we've only just scratched the surface of what you can learn through Tough Love MD. So definitely click the link below this post, no matter where you find this interview. Click a link and you'll go to Amy's wonderful new website, of which I've had a close look at. It's brilliant. So make sure you go and
Aw,
check it
thank
out.
you.
And with all that being said, Amy, I have really, truly enjoyed spending some time with you on the show today. Thank you very much for joining me.
Rick, you have been wonderful. And again, thank you so much. Your support, you were one of the very first people to get on the Tough Love MD train, as it were. So I am so incredibly grateful for your support. And again, I look forward to speaking to any audience member who wants to contact me, and look forward to speaking to you again when that Amazon and New York Times bestseller comes out.